At 6:14 local time, the tone inside the A-10 cockpit changes. This is not a search sweep. It is not random background interference. It is a firm lock. The pilot glances down at the threat display for half a second, then immediately looks back outside. Ahead, two fast movers are already visible, dark shapes slicing through the pale morning light over the Strait of Hormuz. A third aircraft is lower and wider, closing from the right rear quarter. It is not wandering through the area. It is moving with purpose. For one breath, the radio is silent. Then the A-10 pilot keys the mic. Three fast movers, Iranian profile. I'm boxed in. Below him, the water looks flat, hard, and metallic, blue steel under the rising sun. Farther south, merchant vessels are scattered through the shipping lanes. But in this narrow piece of sky, the geometry is tightening by the second. The A-10 is low, steady, and heavy with fuel. It was built to endure, built to stay in the mission, built to come home under pressure. But it was not built to outrun three fighters closing a coordinated intercept. The first Tomcat crosses high in front of him, left to right, just far enough away to send a message. Its wings are swept back. Its silhouette is unmistakable. The second holds position off the A-10's left side, slightly above, pushing the Warthog to stay on its current line. The third remains behind, patient and offset to the right, close enough to matter, distant enough to respond. Another pulse fills the cockpit from the radar warning receiver. The pilot does not answer with panic. He nudges the nose down a fraction and keeps the jet low over the water, holding speed, holding discipline. In moments like this, every movement speaks. Every bank angle, every throttle change, every foot of altitude sends a message. And right now, the wrong message could cost him control of the situation. A sharp voice cuts across the radio. Unidentified American aircraft, alter course immediately. No shouting, no theatrics, just pressure. The A-10 pilot responds in the same tone. Maintaining present heading. The lead Tomcat cuts closer this time. Not close enough for contact. More calculated than that. Close enough to force a choice. Its wake disturbs the air ahead of the A-10's nose. A deliberate shove through the sky. A test to see whether the slower aircraft will climb, break away, or hesitate. It does none of those things. Inside the cockpit, the pilot's left hand stays steady on the throttle. His right hand makes a small correction. The aircraft shudders lightly, then settles again. The sea flashes beneath him, so close that glare fills the lower canopy. This is not an air battle. Not yet. It is pressure. The Tomcats are not rushing in for a clean engagement. They are shaping the space around him. One forward, one to the side, one behind. A moving cage. If the A-10 climbs, it becomes easier to track. If it turns too hard left, the wingman closes the gap. If it stays predictable for too long, the rear fighter controls the timing. The pilot understands exactly what they are doing because in their position, he would think the same way. A second radio call comes in, distant and clipped. American. Axeman 2-1. Picture confirms 3 bandits in close formation. Support is not immediate. Say state. The answer comes instantly. Fuel good, space bad. No wasted words. Ahead, the first Tomcat slides back across his nose again. This time lower. The second inches closer on the left, close enough for the A-10 pilot to catch sunlight on the canopy and a grey flash along the fuselage. The third stays where the pressure is strongest, just outside comfort, just inside risk. The warning tone changes again, stronger and more stable. At 6:15, the box tightens. The pilot drops another 50 feet. From a distance, it would look almost impossible. A combat aircraft skimming over one of the busiest waterways on Earth, while 3 fighters move around it with coordinated precision. But the lower he stays, the narrower the angles become. The Tomcats still have speed, they still have altitude, they still have the initiative. But low altitude steals options from everyone. The first Tomcat reacts by sliding wider. The second hesitates for half a beat. The third begins to creep in. The A-10 pilot sees it all, not as separate movements, but as a pattern. Pressure from the front, containment from the side, closure from the rear. They are trying to make him climb or make a mistake before anyone else reaches the area. Then something appears on the far edge of his display. Not a rescue. Not yet. A seam. A narrow slice between the outer edge of coastal radar coverage and the clutter of civilian traffic moving through the strait. Thin, imperfect, probably temporary, but real. The pilot studies it for less than a second. Another Tomcat slides across his nose. Another lock tone pulses through his headset. Then he keys the mic one more time. I see one gap. At 6:15, the A-10 drops even lower. The altimeter unwinds in small controlled bites. 50 feet, then less. The sea now fills the lower half of the canopy, hard blue and broken by white wakes, with long early morning shadows stretching from the shipping traffic moving through the Strait of Hormuz. At this altitude, instinct has no place, only precision does. The Tomcats adjust immediately. The lead fighter slides forward and to the right, trying to keep the A-10's nose sealed off. The second stays high on the Warthog's left shoulder, far enough out to threaten any turn. The third remains behind, offset and patient, waiting for the first mistake. Together, they are no longer simply surrounding the A-10. They are trying to right its next move before the pilot can make it. Inside the cockpit, the warning receiver keeps pulsing. Not steady enough to signal a full commitment, but worse in its own way. Controlled. Intentional. The kind of radar pressure meant to grind down focus second by second until discipline begins to crack. The Iranian voice returns over the radio. American aircraft, you are entering restricted airspace. Turn north immediately. The A-10 pilot does not argue. He does not ask questions. He does not waste a single word on theater. Negative. Maintaining course. Short, flat, professional. Ahead, the first F-14 dips lower than before, almost level with the Warthog now. The move is deliberate. It is not trying to make contact. It is trying to disturb the air. Jet wash rolls across the A-10's nose, and for a brief moment, the aircraft trembles in the broken flow. The pilot corrects with almost nothing. No sharp pull, no sudden movement, just a touch of pressure on the stick, enough to settle the aircraft back into clean control. That matters, because in a situation like this, the first obvious overreaction can become the first real problem. At 6:16, the Tomcat on the left edges closer, not close enough to commit, close enough to intimidate. The A-10 pilot can now make out the sharp lines of the fighter's wings and the dark canopy catching the morning sun. It holds there for 3 seconds, then 4, closing the psychological distance before closing the physical one. The message is clear. Climb, turn, give us something. The A-10 gives them nothing. The pilot stays low and keeps the nose pointed toward the narrow corridor he spotted moments earlier, a thin seam between commercial traffic and the edge of a much more dangerous air picture. It is not a clean way out. It is barely a route at all, but it is the only piece of sky the trap does not fully own. A clipped American transmission cuts through the static. Axeman 2-1. Additional tracks remain cold. No friendlies in your immediate stack. Recommend hold low. Repeat, hold low. The response comes instantly. Affirm, staying in the mud. And that is where the Warthog starts becoming a problem. Not because it is faster, it is not. Not because it is more agile, it is not. But because at this altitude, over this water, with traffic and surface clutter ahead, the Tomcats have to keep recalculating the intercept every few seconds. Fast fighters dominate open sky. Down here, close to the surface, speed becomes harder to use cleanly. The lead F-14 recognizes it first. It widens out, then cuts back across the A-10's nose again, trying to push the Warthog away from the shipping lane. The second Tomcat mirrors from the left, tightening just enough to feel like a closing wall. The trailing fighter begins creeping in from the right rear quarter, closer now, trying to turn pressure into urgency. The box tightens. Then the world ahead becomes more crowded. At 6:17, the first merchant vessel comes fully into view off the A-10's nose. A massive dark hull pushing north through the strait, white wake boiling behind it. 2 more contacts sit farther beyond, staggered across the lane. Civilian traffic, slow, predictable, but tactically useful. The A-10 pilot does not dive toward the ships recklessly. He angles just enough to place the nearest vessel between himself and part of the Iranian formation. It is not cover in the traditional sense. It is interference, visual clutter, radar complexity, a moving piece on an already crowded board. The Tomcats react immediately. The lead fighter swings wider than before, unwilling to press too low and too fast across the ship's bow, turbulence and surface distortion. The left side fighter hesitates for a fraction of a second, forced to preserve separation. The trailing Tomcat accelerates, trying to close the gap before the lane grows even denser. That half-second hesitation is the first crack in the formation. Not a collapse, just a loosened grip. The A-10 pilot sees it and keeps doing one of the hardest things in aviation. Nothing extra. No dramatic brake, no sudden climb, no sharp reversal meant to look impressive. He stays low, moves forward, and lets the geometry keep shifting around him. The Iranian voice returns over the radio, sharper now. Alter course now. The pilot answers without emotion. Unable. At 6:18, the lead Tomcat makes its boldest move yet. It slices low across the A-10's front quarter, close enough to force a real decision. For 1 second, maybe less, the Warthog pilot sees only fighter, water, glare, and the distance between them shrinking fast. If he pulls up, he gives away the advantage. If he turns hard left, he feeds himself into the wingman's position. If he freezes, the closure does the rest, so he chooses none of it. Instead, he nudges the A-10 lower and slightly right, just outside the Tomcat's expected line. It is a small, disciplined adjustment, almost invisible from a distance, but it preserves control and breaks the timing of the intercept. The jet keeps moving, rough and steady, as if it was built for exactly this kind of punishment. Behind him, one of the Tomcats slides past its ideal spacing. Not by much, but enough. For the first time since the warning tone began, the three aircraft pattern is no longer sealed perfectly. The pilot glances once toward the seam ahead. More wakes, more traffic, more reflected glare, more clutter, and maybe, just maybe, enough room to make the Tomcats work harder than they want to. For the first time in 4 minutes, the pressure loosens. Not much, but enough. At 6:19, the A-10 drops lower still. Not recklessly, not blindly, deliberately. The aircraft settles into a razor-thin band of air just above the water, so low that the surface itself starts to matter. Swell lines, whitecaps, reflected sunlight. At this height, the margin for error is measured in feet, not ideas. But this is where the Warthog begins to change the situation. The Tomcats still have the speed, they still have the altitude, but they no longer fully control the geometry. The lead F-14 tries to rebuild the front wall, widening out before cutting back in from the right to close the A-10's nose again. The wingman on the left holds position, waiting for the mistake the Warthog pilot has refused to make all morning. The trailing Tomcat creeps closer, betting that pressure from behind will finally force him upward. Inside the cockpit, the warning tone sharpens again. The A-10 pilot hears it, registers it, and removes the emotion from it. His eyes stay outside. Ahead, the nearest merchant ship is now large enough to break the horizon, a dark steel mass pushing through the lane with calm, unstoppable weight. Beyond it, 2 more civilian vessels move through the strait in staggered positions. Not protection, not safety, just clutter. Heat, metal, motion, reflection. Enough variables to complicate what had been a clean 3-fighter formation. The pilot keys the mic. "Traffic ahead, I'm dragging them through it." No one answers immediately. There is nothing useful to add. He is already doing it. At 6:20, the lead Tomcat drops lower than it wants to. That matters. Fast fighters are built to dominate vertical space, to turn altitude into stored energy. But down here, over water, near civilian traffic, every correction costs more. Every pass must be cleaner. Every wide move becomes harder to recover from. One wrong angle, and the pilot is not just out of position. He is too low, too fast, and too committed. The A-10, by contrast, is exactly where it was designed to survive. Low, stable, honest. The lead Tomcat cuts across the nose again, trying to force the Warthog away from the shipping lane. This time, the A-10 pilot does not flinch at all. He holds the line until the last clean second, then makes a shallow right adjustment, keeping the aircraft level, tight, and just unpredictable enough to ruin the fighter's timing. The Tomcat flashes past. Too fast, too wide, too clean to finish the setup. The left side fighter immediately compresses inward to rebuild the wall. For 3 seconds, the formation starts to close again. Then the merchant ship's wake rolls up beneath them, throwing broken bands of disturbed air and reflected glare into the picture. The F-14 checks its descent a fraction early. That fraction is enough. Inside the A-10 cockpit, the pilot sees the opening and does what disciplined pilots do best. He does not chase it with emotion. He uses it with precision. Throttle steady, nose low, wings level. He keeps pressing forward. At 6:21, the trailing Tomcat makes its hardest move of the encounter. It pushes in from the right rear quarter, trying to turn pressure into a real advantage before the lane becomes too crowded. The threat receiver responds instantly, stronger now, cleaner, more focused. For the first time, this feels less like intimidation and more like a warning of what could come next. The pilot's breathing tightens once, only once. Then his eyes shift forward and left. The dark mass of the first cargo ship is now moving through the air picture like a wall in motion. Its hull, exhaust stack, heat, and wake begin to break up the clean picture the Tomcats had been using. Not enough to save the A-10 by itself, but enough to force the fighters to solve the problem all over again. The Warthog angles toward the edge of that interference, not beneath the bow, not through some impossible opening, just close enough to plant doubt. The lead F-14 reacts by climbing slightly to keep a clear view. The wingman drifts farther left to protect spacing. The trailing Tomcat, the one pushing hardest, now has to choose. Stay committed at low altitude near civilian traffic, or give up some closure to keep the formation clean. It chooses spacing, only for a moment. But again, that moment matters. A distant American voice cuts through the static. Axeman 2-1, support now moving. Time still not immediate. Continue current game plan. The A-10 pilot answers in 5 words. Current game plan is surviving. The merchant vessel slides beneath the left side of the canopy. The Tomcats are still there, still fast, still above him in performance still holding every advantage the sky can offer. But their box is no longer seamless. They are no longer flying one coordinated trap. They are flying 3 separate problems around one aircraft that refuses to give them the move they want. That is the shift, not victory, not escape, leverage. At 6:22, the left side Tomcat tries to take it back. It drops harder into the pocket, coming in fast, trying to regain control before the next ship in the lane adds even more clutter to the picture. For one high-pressure second, the fighter looks perfectly placed. Then, the A-10 pilot makes the move he has been preparing since 6:14. Almost nothing. A tiny drop in altitude, a slight drift to the right, and once again, a refusal to break upward. The Tomcat's timing falls apart. Not dramatically. Good pilots do not make dramatic mistakes. But it goes just long enough to lose the exact angle it needed. The front wall disappears. The left wall stretches. The pressure from behind pauses. For the first time since this began, there is open air in front of the Warthog. Dirty air, narrow air, temporary air, but air. Then a new symbol blinks onto the far edge of the display. Friendly vectors, distant but closing. The Tomcats see it too. And now the clock is no longer on their side. 3 fighters had boxed the A-10 over Hormuz. Now they have a decision to make. Close the trap before the sky changes, or step away while they still control the exit. At 6:23, the sky begins to shift. Not visually, not yet. No dramatic silhouettes on the horizon, no sudden wave of American aircraft entering the strait. Just a change in the radios, a change in timing, a change in how aggressively the Tomcats are willing to press. Inside the A-10 cockpit, a calm voice cuts through the static. Axeman 2-1, friendly fast movers inbound from the south. Still minutes out. Hold your line. Minutes. In open sky, minutes can sound manageable. In a low-altitude running trap over the Strait of Hormuz, minutes feel endless. Every second is counted in choices, spacing, and discipline. The A-10 stays where it has survived best all morning. Down in the hard blue layer just above the water. Nose steady. Throttle controlled. Wings nearly level. Ahead, the shipping lane remains crowded with civilian hulls and broken wakes. Around him, the Tomcats are still present, still pressing, but the shape of their pressure has changed. They can feel the clock now. The lead F-14 climbs a few hundred feet, just enough to widen its view of the situation. That alone says plenty. A fighter that spent the last several minutes trying to seal the A-10's nose is now choosing perspective over closure. The left side Tomcat holds farther out than before, keeping options open instead of squeezing tighter. Only the trailing fighter continues to push with real urgency. It wants one last chance. At 6:24, that chance appears. The rear Tomcat accelerates from the right quarter and cuts in hard, trying to collapse the distance before American support gets close enough to change the equation. Inside the Warthog, the warning tone sharpens again. Clean, focused, serious. The pilot does not look down. He already knows what the aircraft is telling him. Instead, he studies the water ahead and the shape of another northbound tanker sliding into the lane. It is not where he wanted it. It is where he needs it. Another moving obstacle. Another source of glare, heat shimmer, wake turbulence, and visual confusion. The Tomcat closes. The A-10 does not break high. That matters more than speed, more than confidence, more than any dramatic move a viewer might expect. Because climbing is exactly what the Iranian pilot wants. Higher altitude means a cleaner silhouette. Higher altitude means a cleaner radar picture. Higher altitude means the Warthog stops being a low, stubborn problem and becomes an easier aircraft to manage. The A-10 refuses the invitation. The pilot stays glued to the lower air, uses a shallow left drift to tighten the angle, then slides back right just enough to keep clear of the tanker's wake. To anyone without training, it would barely look like maneuvering at all. But to the Tomcat trying to complete the intercept, it is exactly the problem. The geometry keeps shifting just enough to deny certainty. The trailing fighter runs long, not by much, by exactly enough. Axeman 2-1, picture update, the American controller says. Friendly's now 10 miles south. They are pushing hard. 10 miles. Now that number matters. The lead Tomcat knows it too. At 6:25, it makes one final attempt to take control of the situation. It rolls down from its higher position and cuts across the A-10's front quarter, this time from left to right, trying to rebuild the wall before the southern picture arrives. The move is sharp, disciplined, dangerous. For 1 second, the trap almost looks complete again. Almost. But the left side fighter is still wider than it was earlier. The trailing Tomcat no longer owns the rear angle with the same confidence. The 3 aircraft are still working together, but not perfectly. The A-10 has dragged them out of clean sky and into a closing window. Then a new voice breaks across the radio. Closer now. American. Axeman 2-1, continue heading. We have your north side. That is the moment the initiative changes hands. Not because anyone opens fire, Not because the sky turns into a movie scene. Because the air picture changes, and every pilot in it understands what that means. The lead Tomcat checks its descent. The left side fighter climbs slightly. The trailing Tomcat breaks its hardest line of pursuit and shifts outward, avoiding the risk of being caught between the Warthog below and the new arrivals above. For the first time since 614, there is open water ahead of the A-10's nose. Not safe water, just open. The pilot takes it. No dramatic surge, no triumphant call over the radio. He simply follows the heading he has protected for nearly 10 minutes and moves through the gap before it can close again. At 6:26, the first American fighters enter distant visual range from the south, small dark shapes against the brightening sky. They are still not close enough to take over the entire scene. They do not need to be. Their presence alone finishes what timing started. The Tomcats begin to separate, not in panic, not in disorder. This is controlled, professional, and reversible if the situation shifts again. One climbs, one turns east, one remains for a final second on the edge of the encounter, watching the picture change. Then it follows. The Iranian trap is over. The A-10 pilot allows himself one quick glance upward, just enough to confirm what the radio has already told him. Friendly aircraft are closing and ready to own the next phase if anyone chooses to continue. He keys the mic. Axeman 2-1, clear of immediate box, continuing south. The answer comes back at once. Copy, keep moving. We've got the top. At 6:27, the Warthog clears the danger band it never allowed to fully close around him. Below, the Strait of Hormuz keeps moving as if nothing happened. Tankers hold their lines. Civilian wakes stretch white across the blue. The sun climbs higher over the water. But in the narrow layer between restraint and escalation, the message has already been delivered. 3 Tomcats had cornered an A-10. Then the sky changed. The Warthog is out of the corner, but not fully out of danger yet. At 6:27, the trap is broken. Not destroyed, not reversed, broken. The A-10 remains low over the Strait of Hormuz and keeps moving south, steady and disciplined, while the first pair of American fighters slide into the upper picture behind him. Above and east, the 3 Iranian F-14s are no longer pressing as a single cage. One climbs away to rebuild altitude. Another drifts east with careful separation. The third stays back for a moment, watching, measuring, deciding whether the window is truly closed. It is. The radio confirms it before the sky fully does. Axeman 2-1, friendlies established, continue egress. The A-10 pilot answers without emotion. Copy, continuing. That is how moments like this end in real military airspace. Not with cheering, not with a cinematic one-liner, just a pilot getting the aircraft out of the most dangerous layer and letting the rest of the force take control above him. At 6:28, the Tomcats peel farther away. No weapons are used, no dramatic final pass, no last-second collision course, nothing that would make the moment louder than it needs to be. But that does not make what happens smaller. It makes it cleaner. Because for 13 brutal minutes over one of the most crowded waterways on Earth, 3 Iranian fighters held nearly every visible advantage that matters at the start of an air encounter. They had speed, they had altitude, they had numbers, they had initiative. And for a while, they had position. What they never fully secured was control. That part belonged to the pilot in the slower aircraft. Inside the A-10 cockpit, the workload finally begins to change. The immediate problem is no longer the closing box around him. Now it becomes systems, spacing, fuel, headings, and the quiet shift from high-pressure flying back into post-incident discipline. The pilot checks the instruments. No visible damage. Engine response is normal. Controls still feel right. Then he begins doing what every professional aviator does after a moment that came far too close to becoming something larger. He starts recording it in his mind. Bearings, closure rates, relative altitude, radio calls, every move that mattered. Because the aircraft may be clear, but the mission is not truly over. Everything that just happened is already becoming data. At 6:29, the American fighters settle into a visible escort position above and behind the A-10, high enough to control the upper picture, far enough away not to crowd the Warthog's exit path. Their arrival does not escalate the situation. It closes the chapter. The Tomcats, now outside the original formation, do not move back in. They had tried to turn pressure into control. They failed to make that happen. And that failure matters. Not because the F-14 is a weak aircraft. It is not. Not because the Iranian pilots lacked skill. Nothing in the encounter suggests that. It matters because their entire setup depended on a very specific result. The formation had to stay clean. It had to stay fast. It had to force the A-10 upward, push it into a hard turn, or make it predictable before American support changed the situation. None of that happened. The A-10 pilot denied every part of it. He did not outrun the Tomcats. He could not. He did not outclimb them. He never tried. He did not win by being stronger in a classic air-to-air contest. He survived the trap by refusing to give it what it needed. At 6:30, the controller's tone changes from immediate threat management to structured recovery. Axeman 2-1, confirm able to continue under own power. The answer comes back immediately. Affirmative. One word, but it carries the weight of the entire encounter. Affirmative. The aircraft is intact. Affirmative. The pilot stayed ahead of the pressure. Affirmative. The formation never closed completely. Affirmative. The mission did not end over the strait. Behind the scenes, the second phase is already beginning. Every radar sweep, every warning tone, every radio exchange, every heading change will be reviewed. Friendly sensors will reconstruct the Tomcats' approach pattern. The timing between front pressure, side containment, and rear closure will be studied in detail. The moment the lead F-14 widened, the moment the left side fighter hesitated near the clutter, the moment the rear aircraft pushed too hard and lost perfect spacing. None of it disappears. That is one of the quiet truths of modern military encounters. Even when no one crosses the final line, everyone leaves a record. By 6:31, the strait is widening behind the A-10. Civilian traffic continues on course, unaware of how tense the sky above it had become. Tankers keep moving north. White wakes trail behind steel hulls. Sunlight flashes across the water. The world below keeps moving because the people above it kept the situation from turning into something worse. That matters too. Restraint is often misunderstood by people who have never had to operate inside it. Restraint is not passivity. It is not weakness. It is control under pressure. And on this morning, control decided everything. The Tomcats had the speed to threaten. The A-10 pilot had the discipline to endure. And discipline in the right piece of sky can be stronger than aggression running against the clock. At 6:32, the pilot keys the mic one last time for the message that matters most. Axeman 2-1 stable. Out of immediate threat. Simple. Final. Professional. The controller answers just as calmly. Copy all. That is the real payoff. 3 Iranian F-14 Tomcats had boxed in an A-10 Warthog over the Strait of Hormuz for several tense minutes. The geometry was real. The pressure was real. The warning tones were real. The danger was real. But so was the pilot in the Warthog. And in the end, that made the difference. The Tomcats had speed. They had altitude. They had numbers. They had angles. But for 13 unforgiving minutes over Hormuz, the A-10 pilot held the one thing that mattered most: control.